Meat Boy MMA has the content.
So much meat to fillet and get through.
Cage lights dim for the show. Crowd waits breathless, you know. Hangman and brain rock collide. Roar erupts, echoing wide. Easy faces, DDP. Africa battles, you'll see. Neither leech takes a stand. Chewy, big bad, oh so grand. Meat Boy made his ride. Subscribe for the beef divide. Johnny Walker here for fame. Nepotism burning flame.
I manifested this!
Alright boys, you see the setup. It's unfortunately another Glansburg affair for your boy. Meat again popped hot for the Martinellis. He's on the 14 to 21 day IR. Hopefully he returns next week, but nonetheless, you know the locks continue. If you're new here, this is Meat Boy MMA. This is episode 184, and smash subscribe if you're looking for locks and laughs. It costs you absolutely nothing and will likely yield you something. So I'm going to jump straight into it. It's UFC 305. UFC Mid is on the back burner. Finally, that card is out of the way, so let's jump into the actual bangers. And before we even do that, I want to quickly just sort of recap last week. The Meatlock unfortunately did not hit. It was a brutal Meatlock L. Marcin Tybura got subbed essentially in the first 2 minutes by the Polar Bear, and it was looking good until it wasn't, and ultimately he got absolutely smoked. So Meat overall went 2-2 last week. Your boy went 3-1. Only the Meatlock missed, but it's still been a successful last 3 weeks. 13-7 for Meat, 16-4 for your boy, and you see the damage. We took a little bit of a dent, but nonetheless, lifetime balance is still looking strong. So not going to spend too much time recapping that absolute scrapper of a Meat down card last week, and instead we're jumping straight into this week's Meatlock. And you see the text: Junior Tafa is taking on Walter Walker, aka Nepotism, and this should be an easy light work victory for our boy Junior Tafa. And we are not the biggest fans of Junior Tafa. We don't think that this guy is the second coming of John Jones or Stipe Miocic, but is he better than Walter Walker, who is truly terrible and is truly only in the UFC because his older brother is Johnny? Yes. Junior Tafa, yes, he also might be a product of nepotism, but his nepotistic value is a little bit stronger than Walter Walker's, and we like him to find a way to get this one done. Meat thinks he's going to sleep him in the first 60 seconds. It's a patented under 60-second ripper for Junior against Walter for Meat, and I could see this fight going maybe a little bit longer than 60 seconds, but Junior Tafa should emerge with the victory in this one. It's going to be a striking slobber knocker for sure, likely to be zero grappling, and when that is the case, it's probably going to favor our boy Junior Tafa. So again, this is not our favorite fighter, but when the odds beckon, when the opportunity arises, we're going to capitalize, and even if that means we're picking Junior Tafa for the Meatlock. So you see the balance. Our record again is 103-59, so the Meatlock is still cashing at a high clip, and we're going to be keeping it very simple on this one. Throwing down an easy 130 to net 100. Probably should be a first round finish for Junior Tafa, but if this fight does hit the second and third round, we like him to be able to find a way to get this one done. So let us know in the comments if you too are rolling with this week's Meatlock. The Tybura hiccup of last week is no more, and Junior Tafa is here to win the battle of the nepotism for sure. But nonetheless, comment down below if you agree. I'll keep it moving though, because let's get into better fights. It's Joshua Culibao taking on Ricardo Ramos. And see Meat's takes. He loves Josh Culibao in this fight, and the reason he's picking Josh is because, according to me, he thinks he's continuing to improve. He's got what he feels is better speed and better striking, and Ramos is getting older and is fake washed, according to Meat. So he thinks this should be an easy decision, or maybe even a KO for the favorite Culibao, who is minus 148. Ricardo Ramos is plus 120. I'm going to offer a different perspective, though, because I have been burned by Joshua Culibao way too many times, and I'm done banking on him to win when he is supposed to. So I like Ricardo Ramos as a slight dog in this one. I actually think that the points that Meat makes about Culibao, you could actually make for Ramos. I mean, Ramos is a guy who sort of loves to alternate wins and losses in the UFC, and sometimes when you're banking on him to win is when he fumbles, but that's exactly what Josh Culibao does all the time. So I'm off the Culibao hype train. I think he's going to lay an absolute egg in front of his hometown crowd, and I like Ramos actually to maybe not necessarily pick up a finish in this one, but to likely win a close decision if it does in fact go 15 minutes. But don't be surprised if Ramos busts out a sneaky submission or maybe even sneaks a KO over Culibao, because we know Culibao's tough. We know he is a gamer, right? This dude is always in there, always down to bring a scrap. But Ricardo Ramos could be peaking, and this could be the right time to get him as a plus 120 dog against a guy in Culibao who might still be slightly overvalued in terms of the odds makers. So Meat likes Culibao. Again, your boy likes Ramos. I'm going to go officially by decision. And again, Culibao for decision or KO is what Meat is rolling with. But nonetheless, we'll keep it moving. This is one of my favorite fights on the card. It's Lee the Leech taking on Carlos Prates. And Lee the Leech, I mean, we saw Damon Jackson last week, right? The fake Leech, the other Leech, get absolutely smoked by Chepe Mariscal. And I kind of think that as much of a fan of Leech as I am, this is going to be similar, maybe even worse of a beatdown. And I think there were some 30-25s in that Chepe versus fake Leech Damon Jackson fight last week. But nonetheless, the reason I like Carlos Prates in this one is because he's a fighting nerd. And until a fighting nerd loses, I am not going to pick against them. I'm not going to bet against them. These dudes seemingly are the second coming, the sickest team around right now, and none of them ever like to lose fights. So against a aging veteran like the Leech, who, yes, he does have a lot of experience. He has been there, done that. He's fought on main cards before. I just don't think that he's going to have enough to deal with Carlos Prates, who has lethal power. The dude is fast. He's training with Rufy. He's training with the other fighting nerd, homeboy. You know who I'm talking about. And I just think that that team is too sick. So I like Carlos Prates, probably by decision, though, because Lee the Leech is historically very difficult to finish unless you're Hamzat, and Prates doesn't really have a Hamzat-style game. He's more of a striker. He's out there trying to take your head off and then smoke a cigarette afterwards. But I like Carlos' decision. Meat, though, you see, is taking the plus 285 dog in Lee the Leech, and his rationale for picking the Leech is as follows, right? He just thinks that the experience is going to be crucial, and sometimes we see this happen, right, where Carlos Prates, undefeated guy, killing it, fighting a lot of lower-tier guys, but runs into what we describe as a levels test, and oftentimes the aging veteran, the levels test guy, proves to be too much for the hype beast, and that's sort of how Meat is taking this approach, and he likes him to have a striking advantage. And I don't know if I buy that. I think Prates is probably going to be faster, rangier, hits harder, but Meat likes what he sees from the Leech, and at plus 285, it is juicy. I mean, Lee the Leech is as tough as they come. He's always in competitive contests, and rarely does he get dominated except for that Hamzat fight. So if Meat capitalizes on a plus 285 Leech dog, then that's a beautiful call from him, and maybe it's one that you will agree with. So let us know in the comments if you are taking the Leech, or are you taking the fighting nerd to essentially make their team go 20-0, and we'll see what's next, because those dudes are next level for sure. So again, I like Carlos by decision. He likes Leech, I believe, by decision, but we'll keep it moving. Another absolute banger, slobber knocker of a heavyweight contest. It's Tai Tuivasa, Shui, taking on Jairzinho Rosenstrike, a.k.a. Biggie Bag, and you see Meat's pick, right? He's taking Biggie Bag. He thinks it's simple, right? It's 100%. He's landing a 2-second lip job for the win, and if you're unfamiliar with the 2-second lip job, I mean, the reference is the fight against Alistair Overeem, right, where Overeem versus Biggie Boy. Overeem's absolutely dominated, and essentially the last punch of the fight, the final flurry of the final round, Biggie Boy sleeps Alistair Overeem with the 2-second lip job, splits his lip wide open, and earns himself a KO victory, and an impressive one at that. And ever since that performance, Meat loves to reference that 2-second lip job. And the guy's very similar to Black Beast Derek Lewis, right? Any moment of the fight, if the fight is ongoing, he's dangerous. He's swinging those heavy YOLOs, doesn't seem to gas out too much. It's like the power he has in the first minute is quite similar to the power he has in the last minute. So Meat believes that it's going to be early and often, easy light work victory for Jairzinho Rosenstrike. And at minus 218, it's not the juiciest, right? Because I mean, it's Biggie Boy, right? Sometimes he looks great. Other times he gets absolutely smoked. I mean, I think back to that Volkov contest, but he's taking on Tuivasa, and Tuivasa hasn't won a fight in a million years. The guy loves to get smoked, and you wonder if the Tuivasa experience, the Tuivasa experiment is over, and perhaps it's BKFC, perhaps it's PFL versus Francis, perhaps it's Power Slap, but I don't like Tuivasa to get this one done. I don't like Rosenstrike at around 2-1 of a favorite, but I do think that Rosenstrike will probably win this contest. I'm going to be inspecting the over 1.5 though, because maybe this is a fight where Tuivasa comes out a little bit more measured, and Rosenstrike too is aware of the power that's going to be coming back his way, and as a result, maybe there's a 5-minute feel him out process, and then you can clench it up for the next 2:30 in round 2. So I'm going to be checking out the Rosenstrike and over 1.5 line to see if there's any juicy value there. So I like Rosenstrike, likely by second or third round finish, but if we're getting Rosenstrike at plus 900 by decision, I think that could have some life too. And maybe that sounds a little bit crazy, because most times with these heavy hitting slobber knocking heavyweights, you're likely to see a finish, but something tells me that this is going to be a grind 'em out snooze fest. And like I said, if we're getting decent odds at that plus 900 range for the decision for Biggie Boy, I like where that could end up. So officially, I'll go Rosenstrike by second or third round finish, but check out that decision line and clench it up with the boys, see what happens. So we both like Rosenstrike in this one. We'll keep it moving. I know this is kind of a quick ripper tonight, boys. Hopefully Meat is back by the next one. And shout out to Junior Meat. I know he's waiting to get on this tri-tip rip, so he'll be here soon. Nonetheless, one that needs a little introduction, in my opinion. One of my favorite fights on the card. Matus Gamrot, a.k.a. The Gamer, a.k.a. Brainrot, taking on Dan the Hangman Hooker, who just today said he anticipates himself being the highest paid lightweight in the promotion here pretty soon. And with a guy that has as double-digit UFC fight experience as Dan Hooker, it's really not the craziest take, but Dan Hooker is a guy who always gets better, right? When you count him out is when he counts himself in, and sometimes he likes to cash as a dog. Like, I think back to that fight against Claudio Poyas, where nobody counted Dan Hooker to get that one done, and he did. So at plus 270, you know he's going to be entering the cage with a ton of self-belief and will be unafraid of what Brainrot has to offer. But you see Meat's pick. He loves Gamrot. We have been impressed with Gamrot since the beginning. I mean, even though he lost his debut against the homie Guram, that fight was razor thin, and basically Gamrot has had a lot of success since then, albeit 1 or 2 performances. So he believes, Meat does, that Gamrot is in for an easy ragdoll sesh over Dan Hooker. And Dan Hooker, I mean, he has been ragdolled before. We've seen him succumb to better grapplers, and that's kind of where Meat's head is at. He thinks that he's going to be grappling him for 3 straight rounds, ragdolling him similar to the Jalen Turner fight, right, where Jalen Turner tried his best to keep that fight standing, and when he did, was able to have some success, but the relentless pressure and pace and offensive grappling that Brainrot was able to offer was just slightly enough to edge him the victory in that fight against the Tarantula. And Meat thinks that that fight is a clear indicator of how this fight will go down. So he likes the grapple sets for 3 rounds, maybe even emerges with a submission, but it's probably a decision for Gamrot in this one. And my head's pretty much in the same vein. I'm picking Gamrot on this one, but at minus 340, I think that's way too expensive. I think that the odds makers are essentially disrespecting Dan Hooker, because Dan Hooker's a good fighter, and you might want to hate on the guy. It might be someone who rubs you the wrong way at times, but it's difficult to deny the skill level that Dan Hooker has, the training partners that he works with consistently, and I think that this could be a very close competitive fight, not too dissimilar from Gamrot versus Jalen Turner. So I'm going to take Gamrot in this fight, but I do expect Dan Hooker to land a lot of strikes. I do see Gamrot absorbing a lot of damage, and I can see this fight being very close on the judges' scorecards when the final verdict is rendered. So I'm going to go Gamrot by split or majority decision. If Dan Hooker, however, cashes at a plus 270 dog, don't be surprised, because Dan Hooker is better than the odds makers are suggesting, and I actually think that he, around the same odds as the Leech, is an even more juicy dog than what the Leech is over Carlos Pratas. So officially, I'll go Brainrot by decision. Meat has sub or decision as well. Let us know if you're taking Dan Hooker. Do you think he has some life, or is this an easy work victory for Gamrot? And nonetheless, 2 to go, boys. We're moving. We're grooving. Kai Kara France and the co-meat taking on Steve Erstag. And what can you say about Steve Erstag? I mean, this dude is someone who's essentially taken this flyweight division by storm. He's reinvented what it could mean to maximize your size and your determination at this division, because no one is really built like this guy. I mean, he's long, he's strong, he's fast, he doesn't gas. I mean, the dude is pretty nice, and the odds makers are giving him a lot of respect as a -162 favorite against basically an OG in Kai Kara France, who has been there, done that. The guy has fought in big spots before, and this is essentially the biggest one he's got in a co-meet on an Izzy pay-per-view 305 card. But you see Meat's take. He's taken Steve Erceg all the way. He believes he's the real deal. He thinks that this guy is a top 2 flyweight, and it's tough to argue with that, right? Because although he did lose his title fight opportunity to Alexandre Pantoja, a lot of people thought, and myself included, that Steve Erceg probably won that fight. It was very close. I mean, you can't call it a robbery by any stretch because the fight was as close as it was, but Steve Erceg did a lot of amazing things in that contest, and if that fight isn't in Pantoja's backyard, if that fight was in Perth like the fights are this weekend, you wonder how the judges might have scored that contest. So there's plenty of love when it comes to picking Steve Erceg, and you see where Meat's going, right? He's going Steve Erceg all the way. He thinks Kai's unfortunately a bum, and we've seen him get exposed in big contests before, and Meat thinks that's what's happening against Erceg here. He thinks it's back to Kiwi land, Kiwi farms for Kai, and potentially to BKFC even after this absolutely one-sided mauling that Steve Erceg's about to deliver on KKF. But nonetheless, I think this fight could be kind of close. I maybe value Kai Kara France a little bit more than Meat does, but I'm still picking Steve Erceg. I think that Meat's take on this guy being a top 2 flyweight is a fact. I think that's completely accurate, and I don't see Kai Kara France ever being a champ in the UFC. I mean, maybe he can go fight against Makayev in Brave FC, or maybe jump up to 135 and go to PFL. Not too sure what the future might hold for Kai, but I think Steve Erceg is a little bit too good, a little bit too well-rounded, and I don't see Kai Kara France having any advantages. I like Steve Erceg on the feet. I definitely like this fight on the mat for Erceg, and ultimately I see this as a statement finish opportunity for Steve Erceg. And maybe decision is going to be a more popular pick, but I think this is the Steve Erceg coming out party. These guys are fighting for hometown supremacy. They're trying to see who truly represents their country in this flyweight division, and I like Steve Erceg to make a resounding statement against Kai Kara France in this one. So I'm going Erceg by finish. Meat too likes Erceg by a one-sided mauling. So let us know if we are sleeping on KKF and Erceg is going to fumble the bag, or do you agree with the boys? And lastly, another 3-letter moniker, another interesting fight, and one that everyone's been clamoring for a very long time. Strix du Plessis, a.k.a. DDP, taking on Izzy Adesanya, and this one has incredible build-up. I mean, you know all the personal beef, the vendettas that have been ongoing between these guys, and it's gotten very personal, but it's very exciting, and these guys are out there to prove who truly is the champ, because Izzy likes to argue that the fight against Sean simply wasn't his night, and it's not emblematic of where he is in his career, and essentially is just more of a bad night, a hiccup of a performance essentially. But DDP, meanwhile, is here to show that his pronounced victory over Sean Strickland wasn't a fluke, it wasn't a poor decision by those judges, and instead he truly is the best, because he believes he is, and a lot of people think that he might be as well. And it's tough to argue with DDP. I mean, I've been pretty critical of Dricus because I think the guy is kind of sloppy and he doesn't have the most technical set of skills that other guys in the division have, but it's difficult to argue with what he's been doing lately, and he's definitely shut me up because the guy keeps winning, and you see where Meat's going, right? He's all over DDP. He thinks he wins EZZ, and the reasons are under that second bullet point, right? The pace, the cardio, the strength, and the grappling will simply be too much for Izzy to deal with, and he thinks that Izzy's legs are going to get a little bit tired and maybe gas out, similar to what he looked like against Jan. And, you know, a counterpoint to that might be, well, that fight was at 205, and Jan Blachowicz really imposed his strength and his size in that contest, whereas DDP and Izzy are weight-wise obviously much closer. These are both natural 185ers, but the game plan that Blachowicz implemented against Izzy is one that Meat sees DDP potentially having some success replicating. And basically, if you look at those last 2 bullet points, these are the points to take home. Meat just thinks DDP is so bad that he will win, and that's proven to be the fact multiple times before. And I mean, we were reading articles earlier this week. Is DDP bad? And it's crazy to ask such a question, but it's a question that many are asking, and it's probably a fair one, but maybe not really, because DDP keeps winning fights. So, Meat, last bullet point, in real life, he thinks Izzy wins, but in this WWE UFC multiverse that we happen to exist in, I mean, we are in some funky alternate timeline at the moment. He thinks it's a DDP lock. So this is one that I've been going back and forth with. I do think that Adesanya is going to come prepared, but I don't know. I mean, I've never picked DDP. I don't want to pick DDP, but something tells me that DDP is going to find a way to get this one done. And it's you can tell by my tonality that it's not a pick I'm excited about, because I'm supposed to be the counter perspective to Meat's DDP shilling, but I can't offer it. I think that DDP might be inside Izzy's head, and if Izzy loses this fight, I can see him retiring. I really don't see him being a guy that just hangs around and picks up fights just to pick up fights, and if he's no longer fighting for the gold, I don't see him fighting at all. So I see this being a make-or-break contest for Izzy. Will we see his career continue? Will he come out here and just absolutely sleep DDP like he did to Robert Whittaker, like he's done to Costa, like he's done to so many guys? Or is DDP just truly that guy and the win streak will continue? I kind of think that that's going to be the case. And again, not excited to offer you guys that take. I hate to rep DDP, but I think he probably does get this one done over Adesanya. And it's one that I've given a lot of thought to. So I'm going to go Dricus du Plessis, probably by decision. I could see this fight being close like the Sean Strickland versus DDP contest. And I'm hard-pressed to believe that Izzy's going to go out there and get absolutely slept by the DDP meat bombs. But, man, if he does, then DDP is a dude that you will have to ditch the "this guy is bad" moniker, because anyone who finishes Adesanya is essentially a GOAT in my book. So I'll go DDP by close decision. Meat thinks maybe a finish or a decision like your boy's rolling with, but nonetheless, we are as excited as you could be for this UFC 305 contest. It's finally the UFC mids, the UFC abysmals, the UFC trash are in the rear view. It's finally a stacked card top to bottom, and Perth, Australia crowd is going to be absolutely loving the action that they get come Saturday night. So let us know. Appreciate it if you made it this far. Again, Meat should hopefully be back soon, back to the original format, the true Meat Boy MMA setup, but the locks have to continue. The breakdowns have to persist, and we appreciate you making it this far if you did. So comment down below. Did we miss something? Are you taking someone that we are not? Or do you agree with this week's picks? And we'll see you next week.